Hello and welcome to this second video in the series that I'm doing on the Home Nations Tour prospects. They'll all be touring during this month to the Southern Hemisphere, and in this video we're going to focus on Ireland's tour to Australia. This is going to be very interesting. They're on a 12-match winning streak but haven't won haven't won a series in the Southern Hemisphere since defeating Australia 2-0 in 1979. However, 2 years ago in South Africa were edged out 2-1. So it's going to be really interesting to see if they can break their Southern Hemisphere duck. They've got two uncapped players in their squad, with Tyke Byrne, who is an absolute monster. He's been really integral to the Scarlets and their prospects in how they're playing, and as a result I'm really excited for him, to see him playing for Ireland. Also, they've got the returning power of that front row of Cronin and Furlong and Healy as well, and they've also got Best being rested, so he'll come back for the World Cup, and this is all about practicing those combinations. And they've got players like James Ryan. I'm not sure if this is true, but certainly a couple of weeks ago, who hadn't lost a match in a professional jersey. Like when he was playing for his pro team, either be it Leinster or Ireland, he hasn't lost. And they've got CJ Stander, who, despite being an import, is one of the best imports to have ever been brought over. They've also got Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton, who is in a very, very good vein of form, and as a result you can expect them to absolutely be on top form, with Johnny Sexton marshalling an Irish victory for themselves, for a Leinster victory against Scarlets. Sorry, I'm just a bit tired. And as a result, they can really expect to have a tough game. They'll want to play well on this tour, obviously, but it's whether they go there expecting to win. Like, they'll expect themselves to win. Australia have been playing quite well, and their scrum's eventually going to come back, and it is beginning to really form a new pack, kind of. And they've also got David Pocock's returning, but that first test is where, like, don't judge it on the first test, because Ireland are all of going to be trained together, despite missing their captain and also Bundy Aki, but that won't really make a difference. They're really beginning to develop other players. But that first test, Australia are going to have 6 days to prepare, and all three of their Brumbies players, CO, Pocock and Banks, I think it is, won't be rested, so Australia could be a bit fatigued after just a 6-day turnaround for an international test. So if you see a scoreline of like 50 to 25, or like where defence seems to be optional, or what Australia have just got totally outplayed, then just remember that they've only had 6 days to prepare. But this is going to be really good experience for Ireland. They've got Rob Kearney there, developing into one of the best fullbacks, if not the best fullback in the world. Jordan Lama, the opposite of Rob Kearney, absolutely electric but young, rather than Rob Kearney, who's the veteran of that team. Robbie Henshaw's coming back, and they're beginning to develop really good young talent in Jordan Lama, as I've mentioned. Kieran Marmion, Gary Ringrose and Jacob Stockdale. But Scotland, for Ireland, this is not just about developing and going over there and winning, although that is the main thing. It's about making sure that their scrum half and fly half are able to do really well. But they've also got players there who are pretty much uncapped, but they didn't look that much out of place in the Six Nations, like Jordan Lama only came on for the end of the couple of games, but he looked really good. And so Jacob Stockdale breaking the try-scoring record looked absolutely amazing. In the forwards, they've got Dan Levy as well, Geordie Murphy and Peter O'Mahony, the ultimate one club man, who actually is probably one of the best back rowers in the game at the moment. And it's so good to see players outside Leinster having a go, and I think that is one of the big problems with Irish rugby. Although they're doing really well, they're not really developing the talent. So like, people at Leinster are obviously quite sad that Joey Carberry, it was announced today, is going to be leaving Leinster and joining Munster. But I just think it's so sad that the IRFU are allowed to control who moves. So they literally told Leinster that he had to move because they had 2 international quality fly halves and they wanted Carberry to get game time. But I still don't see why they sent him to Munster. I know they want him to have the best type of rugby there is and the best type of experience, but surely a move to Ulster would be better after the IRFU themselves had blocked a move for Elton Yantis because he can't play for Ireland. And it's good to see the players changing clubs and stuff like that, but I think Ireland have put the Irish players, the Irish national team above the actual players, and it looks like, although that is their job, they're not really allowing the players to develop and therefore not really allowing them to get to where they need to be for the World Cup. And although it might work for this World Cup and the next World Cup, eventually they're going to be running a national team off 2 clubs. And if you look at England, who didn't have a great season, they've got players from 12 clubs, I think it is, in the Aviva Premiership. Wales have got quite a few Dragons players coming through, and they had quite a good Six Nations. Not great, but good. New Zealand have got 5 clubs who all offer those different things and all those different players and experiences and styles of play. Whereas if you're looking at Ireland, they're kind of, Joe Smith used to coach Leinster. It's kind of all this one route. If you get picked for Leinster or Munster, you're going to get the team. If you're not, then you're not. So it's really sad to see that, because it's like there's only a few players outside of it. Like there's quite a lot, but not really great players. So Tyburn is joining Munster. Rory Best isn't going. So in the forwards, Rob Herring, Ian Henderson, Geordie Murphy and Quinn Rue. So that's 4 forwards won't be at either Leinster or Munster. Oh, and Peter O'Mahony won't be at Leinster or Munster next season, and that's not very good for the Ireland team if they're only using 15 players from both their squads. And then in the backs, Bundyacky's injured. Kieran Marmion's a good young talent, and it'll be good to see him develop, and he's at Connacht. John Cooney's alright. He's not a Conor Murray, and he's not brilliant, but he's ready to develop, and they're all ready to develop, but they're all stuck at one club. So there's only 2 that I can see outside Munster and Leinster, who they're outside, those big 2, and that means they're going to get more game time. But and Jacob Stockdale, but the fact is they're not going to be able to develop as much, and if they're just sending Joey Carberry to Munster, he's not going to get that much game time, and it's not going to actually help him develop ahead of the World Cup. So it's really disappointing to see from the Irish, but I think they probably know what they're doing with that Grand Slam, so I stop criticising and move on to the Australians. The Australians have got 5 uncapped players in their squad that they've named to face Ireland over the 3 tests, which is good, and it allows them to develop. One of them being Banks, who's a Brumbies back 3 player, so it could really help the Australians to have this development of depth, and 5 players within that squad is going to really help them. And Checker has also named quite a few game breakers who will be interesting to see. So he's got Genia, Foley, Falau, Beale, Hodge, Karevi, Kunundrani. So they've got that mix of good and not good and bad, but star power who can win a game in a moment, such as like Israel Folau and Bernard Foley. And also players who you don't really haven't really got into that starting team or haven't been able to develop a place, but they're going to be able to play off the likes of Bernard Foley, and that will really help them to develop. They've also got the problem though of Super Rugby. They're only going to have 6 days before the first test, which is a real shame, because it might mean that they lose the test and that everyone will go, oh, Australia haven't been going as well as we thought. But look at the performance at the second and third test and decide. Don't really use that first test, especially if Brumbies players aren't playing well, because Pocock, Alan Alotta and Scott Seo won't be rested against the Sunwolves. It's a real shame for Australian rugby, as the Sunwolves, they're a strong team, but they're not the strongest of teams. Like, they're all pro players, but they're not the Crusaders, so you don't really need your internationals. And it's a shame to see the talent, like, getting overplayed with this whole new stuff about resting players and player welfare. But it will be good to see the back row that they put out. However, despite this waste of talent and stuff that they're going to use, so they're going to have Pocock and Hooper back, which will be really interesting to see if Pocock and Hooper, where they play and how they fit around each other. They've also got Ned Hannigan, who won't be there for the first test because he's injured himself and is recovering. But
what's happened?
You'll get to see a new Australian team, and they're with Pocock and Hooper on the pitch. They've got those 2 scavengers, which will be that will be probably the most interesting part, because Bernard Foley's not that tactical, so probably will get outplayed by Sexton, I'd say. But David Pocock and that back row battle between Pocock, Omani, Hooper and like CJ Stander will be really interesting to see if Ireland's can do everything, or Pocock can really ruin their day and make it hard for them. So like, to sum up, overall I think Ireland will want to win. I don't think they'll win 2-1. I think they'll definitely win that first test, and then with that 6-day turnaround and 6-day training period, it's not enough really for an international team, because that's 6 days from the last game and only roughly 2 days of recovery, so you're only going to have 4 days to train. And yes, they're pro players, but if they want to introduce something from the analytical side to unpick the Irish team or come up with a special tactic to try and nullify Sexton, it really does make Checker's job difficult. As well as this, it's kind of a bit pointless having them doing all this rugby in short spurts, and they could well get fatigued, as it will be their first game back as an international side. So as a result, the Aussie team will probably be weaker for that first test. So look at the second and third test. I think it will be a 1-1 draw. So I think Ireland will win it 2-1. I think they'll try and target a 3-0 victory, but I think they'll win the first 2 tests as they have time to bed in and they're on a long winning streak, and they'll want to get up to that 14 winning streak. But I think Australia will just have something up their sleeve, or something will happen in the third test that's quite either controversial or a moment of brilliance to win it. I think they'll be quite close games. I think Ireland will be able to nullify Australia in the first 2 tests, but I think Australia will figure out a way to win in that third and final test. So thank you for listening to me babbling on about international rugby. If you liked what you hear, please leave a like and subscribe. If you're looking for more in-depth analysis or YouTube videos on either rugby gaming or like rugby news, I definitely follow and subscribe to the Scottish Canon. Follow him on Twitter. I think he's called the Scottish Canon, and also follow me at rugby_god0502. It's really good that people are using this as a way to interact. If you like this style of video, comment down below, or if you'd like me to change, obviously leave a comment down below so that I can improve. Thank you all very much for listening. Goodbye.